Mother Teresa, now canonized as Saint Teresa of Calcutta, was for decades an emblem of compassion on TV screens worldwide. Her image, frail yet resolute, was one of a woman cradling infants and vowing to address the world's deep-seated poverty through the power of Almighty God. She was celebrated as the voice for those suffering in silence, the beacon of hope for millions whose lives had been marked by unimaginable hardship. For many, her work brought tears of inspiration. Yet, for others, her legacy cast a shadow. They saw not the saintly figure revered globally, but a complex, flawed individual whose actions sometimes belied her image as the angel of the gutter. Today, we dive into the darker aspects of her story, exploring truths that may unsettle those who hold her in unwavering reverence. We recognize that this introduction might provoke strong emotions from her admirers. To them, she was an unyielding advocate for the destitute, a woman who stood undeterred in the face of India's grim realities, famines, diseases, and poverty that ravaged countless lives. Her life's work was a vow to live among the poor, to endure her own struggles and illnesses while remaining devoted to the slums. Through her Missionaries of Charity, she extended aid to the marginalized, the blind, the leprous, and those society cast aside. Indeed, these acts are undeniable. Mother Teresa and her fellow missionaries did extend their arms to the impoverished. They cared for those facing the final stages of life, ravaged by diseases like tuberculosis and HIV. They built orphanages for abandoned children and created spaces for the homeless. Her mission, as she described, was fueled by unlimited love to protect and uplift the hungry, the naked, the forgotten, and the outcast. Her organization expanded rapidly, amassing significant funding to build hospitals, orphanages, and shelters across the globe. By the end of her work, her Missionaries of Charity spanned 610 missions in over 100 countries, staffed by 4,000 sisters, 300 brothers, and supported by over 1 million volunteers. With such accomplishments, why would anyone find fault with this paragon of humanity? Let us now adopt a critical perspective, exploring the complexities that accompany even the most celebrated lives. As you know, no story is without its layers. Even the most revered narratives often have undercurrents that challenge their surface. One of the most vocal critics of Mother Teresa was the late journalist and author Christopher Hitchens. While she was still alive, Hitchens co-wrote and presented a scathing documentary titled Hell's Angel, followed by his book, The Missionary Position, Mother Teresa in Theory and Practice. For Hitchens, Mother Teresa was not simply a saintly figure, but a deeply flawed individual whose work raised critical ethical concerns. A recurring critique was her management of the vast financial resources her charities received. Millions of dollars poured into her organization to fund her mission, yet many claimed that the care provided in her facilities was substandard. Critics alleged a lack of pain relief for the suffering and an absence of trained medical professionals, leaving much of the work to untrained volunteers. Despite the immense funding, the operations of her charities were described as disorganized and poorly equipped. To much of the Western public, however, these critiques were invisible. On television, she was seen as a saint, a beacon of hope, and a living representation of God's work. Donors, motivated by faith and a desire to do good, believed they were contributing to a divine cause. But as we'll explore further, the reality was far more nuanced, and for some, troubling. During medieval times, the concept of indulgences allowed individuals to effectively buy their way out of eternal punishment, or at least reduce the tally of their sins on God's celestial ledger. Critics of Mother Teresa have likened her approach to a modern version of this system, suggesting she perpetuated poverty rather than alleviating it. Christopher Hitchens was particularly scathing in this regard, comparing her methods to the corruption of the medieval church. He stated, "This returns us to the medieval corruption of the church, which sold indulgences to the rich while preaching hellfire and abstinence to the poor. Mother Teresa was not a friend of the poor. She was a friend of poverty. She said that suffering was a gift from God." Hitchens even recounted a face-to-face meeting with Mother Teresa where she reportedly told him that eradicating poverty was not her mission, nor was she a social worker. Instead, her focus was on expanding the Catholic Church and spreading its influence. According to Hitchens and others, this meant that her facilities were not designed to reduce poverty through systemic solutions, such as education or empowerment, but to maintain the status quo. In 2010, long after Mother Teresa's passing, a Forbes journalist visited one of her Missionaries of Charity facilities. The writer reported finding volunteers and others questioning the operations. The article described these places as resistant to change, adhering strictly to Mother Teresa's original methods, which often involved volunteers performing untrained tasks. As the article noted, Missionaries has always kept change at bay. But in a world where it is very difficult to hide behind secrecy, the number of disillusioned followers is increasing. One volunteer from the United States shared his shocking observations. "I was appalled by the negligence," he said. "Needles were washed in cold water and reused, and expired medicines were distributed to patients." He recounted witnessing preventable deaths, including one caused by improper feeding by an untrained volunteer. Another patient, undergoing a toe amputation, received no anesthesia. Such practices were not exceptions but seemed to reflect the norm, as echoed by other volunteers who described reused syringes, aspirin as the only treatment for terminal cancer, and cold baths administered universally. Critics argued that, with the immense amount of funding available, these facilities could have provided proper medical care. Defenders countered that these were not hospitals, but homes for the poor, sick, and dying. However, skeptics questioned why, with millions of dollars in donations, professional medical expertise wasn't made available. Moreover, they pointed to the lack of rehabilitation efforts for those who recovered. One European volunteer described cases where patients, rather than being helped to reintegrate into society, were simply turned back to the streets. In some cases, these individuals soon returned to the facilities, mirroring the cycle seen in prison systems worldwide. The term charitable industrial complex has been used to describe organizations that thrive on perpetual poverty, and some have accused Mother Teresa's missions of fitting this mold. One volunteer recounted seeing a diabetic woman who was supposedly transferred to another facility, only to find her back on the streets days later, unable to walk properly. Concerns about financial transparency have also surfaced. A 1991 German report claimed that only 7% of donated funds made it to the intended facilities. So, where did the money go? The answer remains unclear, though Forbes noted that much of it is now controlled by the Vatican. Aroup Chatterjee, a longtime critic and author, has been among the most vocal in examining the legacy of Mother Teresa. His investigations into the operations of the Missionaries of Charity offer insights into the complexities and controversies surrounding her work. Dr. Aroup Chatterjee, a man who grew up in Calcutta, had long been a vocal advocate for the poor, often shouting about their dire conditions from within the very slums he sought to improve. His perspective was informed by his time studying to become a doctor and his first-hand experiences witnessing abject poverty. Later, after moving to the UK, he was stunned by the adulation Mother Teresa received there. To him, she was revered as a saint. Yet during his time campaigning in the slums of India, he claimed he never once encountered her or her sisters. Chatterjee devoted years to researching her legacy, ultimately writing Mother Teresa: The Final Verdict. He spoke with individuals who worked closely with her Missionaries of Charity and documented troubling practices, calling her venerated image a bogus construct. In interviews, Chatterjee described his exhaustive research, which included traveling the world, following slum dwellers with a camera, and interviewing hundreds of people. The result of his work, he claimed, shattered the myth of Mother Teresa as a beacon of goodness. One of Chatterjee's most controversial allegations was that many of the missionaries' facilities were riddled with neglect and mismanagement. Hygiene was poor, unnecessary deaths occurred, and patients were sometimes baptized on their deathbeds without their consent. Perhaps most provocatively, Chatterjee refuted Mother Teresa's claim, made when accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, that she had saved tens of thousands of lives in India. He argued that the actual number might barely reach 700, a figure that seemed small given the millions in donations her organization received. Chatterjee also accused the Missionaries of Charity of offering minimal aid compared to other charities operating in Calcutta and elsewhere. In some cases, he said, their work focused more on religious conversion than practical support. Yet, Mother Teresa's public image remained untarnished, especially in the Western media. Politicians, eager to associate themselves with her saintly reputation, eagerly posed for photographs with her. Bill Clinton, for instance, granted her honorary U.S. citizenship, praising her as an exemplar of a just society. Chatterjee contended that this global adoration was largely a product of Western media's uncritical portrayal of her. He argued that while her image as a saint was being celebrated abroad, the poorest in Calcutta remained neglected. In an interview with the New York Times, he revisited these points, adding that improvements had been made in recent years, such as the inclusion of medical professionals in some facilities. Still, he claimed that in Mother Teresa's heyday, patients often endured harsh conditions, such as syringes washed in the same sinks used to clean dishes or insufficient pain relief for amputations. Beyond these allegations, critics also scrutinized her relationships with controversial figures. She maintained ties with neo-fascists in Italy, supported the brutal Duvalier regime in Haiti, and received millions from convicted fraudster Charles Keating, even traveling on his private jet. In the US, she received the best medical care money could buy, far from the treatment her patients endured. Financial transparency was another issue, with reports claiming that only a fraction of donations directly benefited the poor. It was even alleged that the Vatican Bank held a massive account in her name, potentially worth billions. Critics also argued that her brand of charity perpetuated a white savior narrative, reinforcing colonialist attitudes. Her image was celebrated by wealthy Westerners who saw her work as heroic, but overlooked the systemic causes of poverty. Some accused her of pitying those she helped, while failing to address the roots of their suffering. Even after her death, her myth persisted. NPR, for instance, published a piece lending credence to her supposed miracles, such as curing a man's brain abscess. Skeptics questioned the validity of such claims, arguing that faith-based narratives had eclipsed rational scrutiny. However, in her private diaries, Mother Teresa revealed feelings of doubt, emptiness, and darkness. Still, she upheld controversial stances, opposing women's reproductive rights and asserting that suffering was redemptive. When asked if the poor should endure their suffering, she famously replied, "I think it's very beautiful for the poor to accept their lot, to share it with the passion of Christ. I think the world is being much helped by the suffering of the poor people." If you enjoy our content, we'd love your support. By joining one of our channel memberships, you help us continue creating videos like this one while gaining access to some amazing perks. As a member, you'll unlock exclusive content available only to supporters, earn loyalty badges to show off in comments and live chats, and enjoy priority responses to your comments, shoutouts, and more. The best part? Memberships start at just $2.99 a month, less than a cup of coffee. Even small contributions make a big difference for the PJ Bible TV team in covering production costs and delivering the content you love. And if you're not ready to become a channel member today but still want to support us, there are other ways to help. Engaging with our videos is a tremendous way to show your support. By taking just a few moments to like the video, share it with friends, family, or on social media, and leave a comment, you're telling the YouTube algorithm to share our content with more people. Your support, no matter how you choose to show it, means the world to us. Thank you for being part of the PJ Bible TV community.